Halo katuantok, you herekam no Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific ni Koroi Hawkins. Coming up, a Pacific geopolitical expert says US militarization in the Pacific will continue under Trump.
And it is a way that the US is saying, this is our sphere of influence.
Also, Surangel Whipps Jr is leading by a big margin in the Palau presidential race. And later on,
satisfaction and happiness because, we worked hard through the week preparing to come and win.
Fiji and Samoa were the weekend's big winners for Pacific teams in Union and League. A Pacific geopolitical expert says he expects US militarization in the region to continue under Trump's presidency. The president-elect and the Republican Party have secured an overwhelming election victory, also securing control of the Senate and the House. An unfettered Donald Trump presidency will likely bring a lot of changes to US economic, climate and foreign policy. But the University of Hawaii Manoa Associate Professor Taasisi Stara Kabutaulaka says there's so far been consistency militarily in the Pacific. I spoke with Dr. Kabutaulaka and began by asking if there had been anything to glean from Trump's campaign about what might be in store for the Pacific.
So in terms of the campaign itself, there was hardly anything that was specifically about the Pacific Islands. A lot of the discussions were within the U.S. or about the U.S. And when there were expressions of foreign policy, it was mostly in the Middle East or in Europe. And understandably, given the wars that we are seeing in the Middle East and the U.S. focus on it, and especially given the war in Ukraine, there are also expressions of foreign policy in relation to China and in relation to Russia. China, a lot of it is vis-a-vis economics and economic relationship. We've seen Trump talk about, putting tariff on goods that are coming in from China as a way of ensuring that they protect industries within the U.S. and ensuring that there is growth of industries in the U.S. We've seen that language vis-a-vis Mexico in the final days of the campaign as well. But there is nothing specific about the Pacific Islands per se. However, we can see Trump's thinking about the Pacific, or at least his administration, or people in his administration, if we go back to his last term in office, and the kinds of things that were introduced. And I think central to that is what is known as the Indo-Pacific strategy. So the idea of the Indo-Pacific and the pivot from the Middle East to Asia-Pacific was something we saw during the Obama administration, or at least we begin to hear that language. It became much clearer during the Trump administration. And then we see the establishment of the Indo-Pacific strategy, which includes the rhetorics around things like free and open Indo-Pacific. And that includes the Pacific Islands. So the Indo-Pacific includes the Pacific Islands, Southeast Asia, the Indian Ocean, and all the way to East Africa. And so that's huge. And it is a way that the US is saying, this is our sphere of influence. And a lot of that language, a lot of that rhetoric is about pushing back on China's growing and assertive influence. And I expect that we will see more of that in this administration as well. We've seen it in the Biden administration, but I think that the nature of engagement geopolitically will be different in the Trump administration. And what I mean is that particularly finance put into more military presence in the region. We've seen an increase in the number of Marines in Guam, and we've seen the establishment of a new base in Guam. We've seen talks about the establishment of military installations in Palau, and the president of Palau is quite receptive to that. We've seen agreement to station 6 B-52 bombers in Darwin. We've seen more engagement at the US-Australia base in the Pine Gap. And I expect that under the Trump administration, we will see an increase in military presence in the region, if that is at all possible, given the already huge military presence that the US has.
On the subject of climate change, Trump was responsible for reversing a lot of the work by Obama in that space. Is he likely to do the same again? There's been some talk that this administration of Trump will differ from his last tenure. In what ways do you think that might have bearing on this space?
I think if the Trump administration is different from the last one, it will be not because of climate change, but because of trying to create diplomatic relations for geopolitical purposes. And so it will be about the militarization of the climate change issue, that you're using climate change to build relationships so that you can ensure you do the counter-China issue as well. Now, Trump very recently, actually, at the end of September, when he was in Georgia visiting the devastations of Hurricane Helene in Georgia, when he was interviewed about the climate crisis, he said, and I quote, that it is one of the great scams of all time. And so he is a climate crisis denier. And I suspect that a lot of people who are close to him, and some of whom will become his advisors, will be climate crisis deniers as well. Now, the Biden administration, at least rhetorically, has made a lot of commitment to working with Pacific Island countries to address climate change issue, and even talked about, working to try as much as possible to meet the 1.5 degree that scientists have said is useful and Pacific Island leaders have demanded. And also at the last Pacific Islands Forum meeting in Tonga, US aid has made a commitment to provide $10 million addition on climate change related issues to the Pacific. Of course, that has to go through Congress, and whether Congress approves or not is another issue, which raises another important issue, that whilst there is a lot of focus on the presidency election, I think Pacific Islanders also need to be cognizant of the composition of the US Congress. I think what we've seen is that the Senate has flipped from the Democrats to the Republicans. And if the House also flips, then a lot of those commitments that we've had on climate change, even if the White House says that we will push this through, would be really unlikely to go through Congress. And so those are the issues that Pacific Island countries should be looking at.
A Palau Election Commission spokesperson says it's highly unlikely President Surangel Whipps Jr will lose the election. Official results for the U.S. territory's presidential election are yet to be declared, but unofficial results have President Surangel Whipps Jr well ahead of his brother-in-law and former four-term President Tommy Remengesau Jr. Lydia Lewis has more.
The owner of local media outlet TMC Palau, Nawakler Isak Sualadov, who is also contracting to the Election Commission, says President Whipps Jr has a mountable lead.
Even if we receive every single vote, it's just, unless it's by some miracle that nobody voted for the current president, that would be the only way we can see happening. But by every metric, there's no way that the president and the vice president can catch up.
When asked how likely a swing in direction would be, this was his response.
Very, very unlikely. Very, very unlikely.
While the US election results are in with Donald Trump now president-elect, Palau's are due next week. President Surangel Whipps Jr told the ABC, regardless of the results, both the US and Palau want peace and prosperity in the Pacific.
I think the Republicans were more focused on security and defense, and they understood the importance of Palau and how it fit in with that. What we've seen under the Biden administration is also the Democrats coming on board and seeing the importance of that. So we've seen that shift. And I think now more than ever, it's really bipartisan support from both parties understanding the importance of building a strong relationship and how we can work together to ensure that we have a free and open Indo-Pacific.
TMC's Mr. Swaladov says the US territory has historically been a friend of both red and blue political camps.
This is probably the most pro-US country in the Pacific. But all the data from the office of the president is really doesn't matter who the president is. Our issues are bipartisan issues, and we've had several visits from several congressmen from the U.S., and they've all assured us that regardless of who the party wins, Palau would issue for a top bipartisan issue.
When questioned on President-elect Donald Trump's climate rhetoric, this was President Whipps Jr.'s response.
I think that's one of the areas that we definitely, as the Pacific, need to come together and talk with the United States, especially President Trump, and share our concerns. And we hope that the strength of the relationship that Biden began with the Pacific will continue.
An official result in Palau's election is set to take some time, with absentee ballots to be recounted on November 12th, followed by a declaration expected 7 days later on the 19th.
It was a mixed bag of results for Pacific teams in rugby union and league tests over the weekend. Big wins for the Flying Fijians and Fetu, Samoa were the two positives. It was a more disappointing weekend for Tonga and Papua New Guinea, losing their Pacific Championships Rugby League outings. Elias Atora has the details.
The Flying Fijians, boosted with the return of the experienced Europe-based players, wrote themselves into the history books, taking Wales out 24-19 in front of over 60,000 fans at the host Principality Stadium. Co-captain Tevita Ikanivere says the win was the result of the hard work players put in to their preparations.
I think satisfaction and happiness, because we worked hard through the week preparing to come and win, and when it finally did happen, I think it was just pure joy and happiness knowing that we did the work in the week and we came and finished it off on the field today.
Head coach Mick Byrne says getting the job done was a big relief.
I guess I was just ecstatic for the players. I know how hard they've worked. There's some players that have played on this ground a few times and haven't had the success, so for them to have the success tonight was brilliant. I've got to say I was probably when we finally got there I was a bit relieved actually, because they were down there hammering our line, but the boys held on and coaches have done a great job.
In Sydney on Sunday night, Samoan celebrations continued as Fetu Samoa secured promotion to next year's Pacific Cup with a big 34-12 victory over the PNG Orchids, who are now relegated to the bowl competition. The women had earlier qualified for the 2026 Rugby League World Cup, and player Christian Pio says getting the win was a bonus for them.
Oh my gosh, our first goal was get through World Cup, and then now we got this, so massive bonus for us.
5'8" Pauline Piliae Rasambale says they're ready for 2025.
I don't think any words can describe the feeling. The journey started from last year, when we played that game against Fiji, but I'm just really proud of the girls and how far we've come, and we're just ready for next year.
But it was not to be for the Tonga 13, who chased the Kangaroos all the way till the final whistle in Sydney as they went down 2014 in the Men's Pacific Cup final in front of their adoring fans, who turned the CommBank Stadium into a sea of red. Despite the loss, head coach Christian Wolf says his team left everything on the pitch.
I'm very proud of our blokes. I thought our effort was outstanding, and that's the only thing I can ask for in the team is they give their absolute best effort, and that's what we've seen out there tonight. And they never stopped fighting, they never stopped trying. They gave themselves a chance on the back of that, and we had some chances. Makes it a little bit different, puts a little bit more pressure on. A couple of other things we just didn't quite execute, but at the end of the day, as I said, I'm really, really proud of the effort.
The PNG Kumals also lost their chance for promotion to the Pacific Cup, with the Kiwis delivering a 54-12 send-off for veteran playmaker Sean Johnson. Meanwhile, Tonga's league disappointment was repeated in Union, with a Kaletahi losing the first match of their European tour, going down 25-15 to Romania in Bucharest on Sunday morning.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. For myself and the RNZ Pacific team, Luki Mufala, next time more.